We sound pretty good for two dead bitches. Welcome back to Movies After Midnight. After a short hiatus, we are back with the... It's not really Franken Week anymore. It's more of a moving Franken time that exists in all of us.
Which, let me tell you guys, not everybody in our lives can say we're back.
So yeah, we are back. Previously, we have covered the classic Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein. Pretty much everyone has watched those, but I think there's like ultimately like 8 movies in this like classic Universal Frankenstein cycle. Also, I am your host Evelyn, and I am joined again by Aaron.
You just were so excited to dive in. Hi, it's me,
because you
Aaron.
need to know who's talking about this stuff. This is important.
Woo. It's me, Aaron, and before this podcast, I smoked good. Smoked good.
I love how we
yeah.
came out the gate so unhinged. This is going to be great. I'm so excited for the rest of this podcast.
Evelyn and I are in an extremely unhinged mood. Because our lives, to be honest here, everybody, unhinged.
We're recording this on the 30th of October. The eclipse is like over. Like we're just full on goblin mode.
Oh my goodness!
But yeah,
yes.
So pretty much everyone has at least heard of Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein, but I feel like the rest of the series, the other like 8 movies, you only really know or talk about if you're like if you're an enthusiast for 40s horror movies. And this is kind of where we're starting to get into that territory. So the next 2 movies we're going to be talking about, Son of Frankenstein and Ghost of Frankenstein, which, a lot like the first 2, they kind of do this fun little part 1, part 2 kind of deal.
Yeah, they pick up right after the other leaves off.
And Son of Frankenstein specifically, as we watched this one, I noticed a lot of young Frankenstein takes from Son of Frankenstein.
Yeah.
Especially because we get like the Frankensteins, like so with Son of Frankenstein we have Basil Rathbone is playing Wolf Frankenstein, who is the son of Henry from the first movie. He's a pretty big name of the era. I think he's most well known for he was the OG Sherlock Holmes. I remember watching with my parents a bunch of the Basil Rathbone like Sherlock Holmes episodes.
I came to Sherlock Holmes through Robert Downey Jr. and I forced my grandma to buy me a long scarf so I could be like him. And then that's right when BBC Sherlock came out. And then I watched Basil Rathbone. So, Rathbone.
Yeah,
he's great.
But yeah, I really like him in this Son of Frankenstein, and also Bela Lugosi as the hunchbacked Igor. Who?
Okay, really quickly to go back to Basil, really quick. He really does kind of fit the bill for the character, and I think his casting as Sherlock as well as this guy, they feel like the same type of character. He's able to do this
like. At least in this movie, it's been a while since. I don't think he does as much as Sherlock, but he's a very like upbeat Sherlock Holmes. But like in this movie, he does this like frustrated smugness very well that suits a Sherlock Holmes, where he's like.
Because I think even Sherlock Holmes at his happiest is still like this like intellectual that doesn't feel like he's getting recognized the way he should be. And that's the same exact character. And he's just
tired of dealing with all these stupid people's bullshit because they're so much dumber than him.
Exactly, and that's exactly what this character is. I think type is so specific, and that is his type for sure. And
Bela Lugosi. So I guess Bela Lugosi, most known for playing Dracula. And then second most known for inspiring a song by Bauhaus. And then maybe third most known for Plan 9 from Outer Space. But none of those are important.
I don't know why I don't know why the second one got me so good just now.
I've been on goth talk lately. But he because he was a big star for their initial, like, Dracula is like the genesis of, like, Frankenstein, the Wolfman, all of that followed Dracula. And so they initially wanted him to play the monster in the first movie that eventually ended up going to Boris Karloff. And so this is the first time Bela Lugosi has actually come back to this series that they initially wanted him for. And I really like his character of Igor, because he's a very, like, I don't know if describing him as greasy does service to the character, but he's very, like, he's conniving. He's, like, a very, like, disheveled. He's got, like, there's backstory that they tried to hang him once before and it didn't work, so his neck's all fucked up, and
if all the bad qualities of Faust were, like, made into a character, it's this fucking guy.
Yeah. Like,
I also thought he looked incredibly similar to the blind man, and I couldn't tell if that was deliberate
that would be
or not.
Interesting. Because that's the thing someone else talked about, because later in the movie he talks about, like, having worked for Henry Frankenstein and, like, knowing the monster and stuff. But he's, like, very obviously, like, a new character who's never showed up before. As to, like, figure out where he
yeah.
Which, again, yeah.
The monster's famous now, so he's pretending he knows the
I mean,
monster.
he could be, because, like, he's obviously a guy who just kind of, like, works people for his own ends, so, like...
Yeah, he's a weirdo for sure. Bela Lugosi.
But yeah, this is one of my favorite roles I've seen Bela Lugosi in, because he just does such a good job.
My favorite is that one where he's like, "Not man, not beast, thing." Is that oh my god, that's Island of Lost Souls,
God.
which is the director of the next
It
one.
all comes
Crazy.
back.
Okay, anyway, sorry. Whoa, everybody's 2 degrees away from in the Universal Monster Universe.
I mean, honestly, I was watching James Rolfe's retrospective, and he was like, because again in the next movie, Evelyn Ankers plays a character, and she was in the Wolfman, and he was like, "Oh, who am I kidding? Universal reused their actors more than a high school play." And
that's so real. But also, did you just call
yeah,
her
well, because she's
Evelyn?
British, and British people say it Evelyn.
Oh. I was like, Evelyn, did you just mispronounce your name?
Because this is a thing. Yeah, because, like, I'm American, so I call myself Evelyn, but a lot of British people say it Evelyn.
I was aghast.
And so I'm never, with other people,
evil.
I'm never quite sure, but I've heard, yeah.
Evil, 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 evil.
And then Evil Lynn if you're a He-Man villain.
Exactly.
But yeah, so this movie starts.
Also, sorry, really quick, last bit about Bela Lugosi. I want a game theory where Igor and Dracula are canonically the same person.
But
because that'll
in
get
the
real
James
wacky
Rolfe video, he
during
made
House.
a like joke, basically a game theory about Igor and Fritz from the first movie being the same person.
That's so funny.
Because it's like he gets because Fritz gets hung and Igor was hung, and he's like, maybe the monster didn't kill him. Maybe in the time it took him to run down there, a tribunal ran in, had a court session for Fritz, condemned him, and then hung him.
Jesus.
But
I will say I liked Ghost of Frankenstein a little bit more than Son of Frankenstein, because I just preferred the plot difference, you know. But I think Son of Frankenstein has incredible cinematography.
I think Son of Frankenstein I think I like a little more because the cinematography and the performances which we'll get into a little more, but there's like really good character work in this movie.
Yeah, and I'll go into a little bit more when we get to Ghost, why I liked Ghost a lot. I just like, I'm not big on the family plot, you know what I mean? Yeah. I'm like, I don't care.
But yeah, so I think this is the first time we start the movie. It establishes that the village is called Frankenstein, which I don't think was a thing before. But there's like these townsfolk and council members talking about like basically how ever since the last movie, it's been like an indeterminate amount of time, presumably like 20-30 years or so, that basically like their village is ruined because nobody wants to live there, nobody wants to come there because it's like seen as cursed and all this stuff, and like basically how Frankenstein ruined everything for everyone. Cut to
which, like, I like how the formula for every Frankenstein is Frankenstein just minding his business, being a good person, and then everybody ruining
Literally.
his day.
I mean, he wasn't really being a good person at the start of the first movie. He was like digging up the dead and like.
Oh yeah, I mean, I guess that's true.
But we meet Wolf Frankenstein and his wife. He's which I think this is the first time he's straight up married. Like there's no romantic plot. It's like she's already just there. But they're like, I think it's established that they at some point the Frankenstein family moved to America, and he's been like a professor in the United States, and he's coming back home to like take the like claim the castle that like is his like inheritance or whatever. And again, this is where I really like Basil Rathbone's performance as Wolf, because he's talking about his dad's experiments, and he's like, my dad did nothing wrong. If he had the right brain, then it would have gone perfectly, and everybody would like stop giving him shit. Like so the fact that he's so like committed to like, my dad literally did nothing wrong, fuck everyone who thinks he did something wrong. Like it's he sells it really well, I think.
And it's really like sins of the father vested in the
yeah
children.
Well, it's
I think there's something interesting about that, like a whole son feeling like they have to avenge father. Also, this brain thing I find very fascinating. And I think I liked Ghost of Frankenstein a little bit more because it goes into it a little bit more. But I like the like nature versus nurture argument that's being like made every single one of these
it's
movies.
interesting because I feel like the movies change their perspective on it too over time.
Yeah. Because this idea that like you have good brains and bad brains is very interesting.
And I don't even listen to Bad Brains that often. A lot of music references this episode. But this scene I think was directly parodied in Young Frankenstein. But they arrive on train, and he like.
Well, this one, like you said, it feels like beat for beat, like Young.
Yeah, because with him arriving and everything. But he talks to the towns. All the townspeople are lined up, like to see him come into town, and he's like, oh hey everyone, I hope you'll like, I know our family wasn't that popular, but I hope you'll like treat us well, and we're here to make you respect our family again. Everyone's like, oh whatever, and then they just leave, and I'm like, what were you expecting?
They're like, this guy stinks.
Oh brother. And so then they go to the castle, which the castle in this movie, like, it's very German expressionist all of a sudden, and I kind of dig it. But it was like, there's a lot of expressionism in the sets in this movie. Like, they're very like stark and dramatic.
Yeah, because like I remember vividly there was that scene where like the kid is on the floor playing with like toys or whatever, and like the room is so fascinating. It's like completely empty except for like a little bed, and then like all these toys in the middle of the room. It was just incredibly surreal the whole time. And I think it's like it's interesting how you have this like his return to the home is, it's like the home is surreal, but like It's interesting that it's a homecoming, but the home environment is incredibly surreal. It reminded me like a little bit. I just watched House, and that's kind of like a little bit how it is in House.
The set that. Oh.
And I don't know what statement that's making. I guess it's like maybe like an anti-familial, but anyway.
Well, it's also, I feel like it could also be kind of like he's trying to make this place his home, but ultimately it's not like this, like it's not where he's supposed to be, kind of. I was just
I think that, but I think it's also a little bit more like it creates like this, like he's standing up for his dad a lot.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But it's almost like his environment is like betraying that and trying to show him how off-putting his dad is.
Yeah.
It feels like it's like a direct call out to like he's trying to like make this environment seem like so normal, and his dad seemed like a misunderstood intellectual and misunderstood. He would have been fine, but like the actual house and the environment is so surreal and weird because like I think there's like that moral question with his dad. Maybe
I was gonna say the set that stuck out to me the most with the house is the dining room, because it's like there's a table in the middle, and then there's like a fireplace on each side of the table, which is a really weird way to lay out your house, I feel like. And it like
when I'm rich and famous, we're just gonna build a mansion like that.
A mansion.
It's a mansion.
But yeah, I feel like that plays into the like it's homey, but it's also really unnatural. Yeah.
Because do we ever see his like home, his new home where he settled?
Not in the United States, no. Like we only get,
because I feel like in that way it makes it seem like so much more normal. I feel like, or I guess not, maybe normal's not the word, but I'm sure it's a very different environment to this one.
So they arrive and he's like looking and he sees his father's notes and stuff that he left behind, which is really interesting because I feel like some of this also, it's interesting because it casts like a different light on Henry Frankenstein after having seen him in the last two movies, and then, you know, there's this like undefined period of time where he was a father. But even because it seemed like by the end of the second of Bride of Frankenstein, he was like done with monster making, and yet he still believed in his own work enough that he kept it around and like wrote these notes to his son that are like, maybe someday you'll do what I couldn't, and all this stuff.
Also, I feel like I wanted to ask you, do you feel like you lose the queer subtext in this one?
In this one, a little bit, yeah. I didn't really see.
Yeah, I felt the same way. Which was interesting because it's such a huge underlying part of the other two. So it's so surreal that like Frankenstein just pumped out all these kids when like he's not even really like super hypersexual.
Well, I think that's what happens like when you switch directors, because no, we're not with James Whale anymore.
And every horror franchise does it. Yep. There has to be all these kids.
I wrote a note, and this is a thing. I think what at this point I decided what I think the central theme of this whole series is kind of the conflict of like legacy versus bloodline. Because like when you like the whole thing in the first movie was like he wants to leave behind this legacy of his work, when like maybe he would be better off like start like carrying on the family bloodline. And now this movie, he did carry on the family bloodline, but in a way that also carries on his legacy and work, and like how those two, how the bloodline and how that he passed on and how the work that he passed on like interact with each other, seems to kind of like be like what we're exploring in these next two films.
Yeah, I agree for sure.
And then we're also introduced to Inspector Krogh, who is like also a really good character in this movie. I just wrote the Inspector's a G. He's played by Lionel Atwill, and he's also very directly parodied in Young Frankenstein, because he like introduces himself and he talks about how he's talking to Wolf about like the monster, and Wolf's like, oh, you don't believe that monster's real, do you? And he's like, actually, he came into my house and ripped off my right arm when I was a boy, so yeah, I'm pretty sure he's real. And
Holy
like he talks that it comes back later, because he's like, I wanted to be in the military, but I could only be a gendarme because like I was physically disabled. And later, when Wolf Frankenstein's son comes in, he asks the inspector if he's like, are you a general? And Wolf is like, no, he's something better than a general. He's a gendarme. And so it's like this interesting, like, because there's a lot of like confrontation between the two characters, but that moment is where he's like, he's giving him this respect where he's like, you know, hyping him up to his child, even though he didn't have to. And that's like, because like, I guess what makes this my favorite movie, I think, is the relationship between Wolf and the inspector, where they start off very cordial and respectful, and then like basically like as the inspector starts realizing he might be reanimating the monster, this is a dumbass pull, but it gets very Death Note between the two of them, where you have like this one guy who's up to something nefarious and he's really smug about it.
Holy shit.
And he's like, but then this other guy is also like really smart, and he's like, I know you're up to something and I can't prove it, but I'm gonna keep trying. And there's like this building like frustration and everything between it's like it's all played out really well.
Yeah, I think you're the Death Note analogy is hilarious.
Son of Frankenstein is just Death Note. That's my
Son of Frankenstein is the Death Note
exactly.
of the Universal monster movies.
But then our last character introduction is we get a proper introduction to Igor, as Wolf decides to check out his father's lab, which I guess is a different lab because it's not in the windmill anymore, but it's like this kind of like falling apart building that I think they say used to be like a Roman bath or something. And Igor has been like living there, and when Wolf,
which like I felt like that was supposed to symbolize something, but
yeah,
I couldn't tell
like
what.
I mean, maybe it's like because it's built on top of the Roman ruins. It's kind of like he's building on top of like his father's ruined. I don't know.
Well, I guess like the male relationships feel very like that kind of like epic scale proportion. They have like a grandness to them that I feel like is very like Caesar getting stabbed.
A little bit, yeah. But so Igor, at first he tries to like drop a rock or something on Wolf, and Wolf like gets out of the way, and like I can't remember, he's like, I think he has a gun, because as I noticed, everyone has guns in this movie all of a sudden. But he's gonna shoot him, and he's like, oh no, I just did that because I thought you came up here to like hurt me. Which
Igor's such a little asshole.
Such a dick, which is why he's such a good character, but he's the worst.
Yeah, he is the worst.
And so Igor is like, yeah, this monster. He takes him down into this like mausoleum where his father and his grandfather are buried, and he shows him that the monster is down there and has been like recovering, and he says this is where the timeline gets fuzzy, because he says that he was friends with the monster, and at some point the monster was standing under a tree and lightning struck the tree and like not crushed him, and he's been like unconscious ever since.
The monster was trying to like he was Siddhartha meditating.
We need to watch Little Buddha.
Oh my god, yeah, that's on my list.
It's not good, but it's worth a watch. But he's like, yeah, he needs someone to, basically he's trying to talk Wolf into resuscitating the monster, and Wolf is like, yeah, I'll do this and it'll prove like that my father wasn't awful and he wasn't insane. And
which like I feel like it's so surreal how they keep making this point with like the brain and like how the monster is evil, because the monster literally has not been
and he
evil.
gets less evil over time too. which maybe
so it's like such an interesting defeat of the premise, which I think is the point.
Yeah,
because
it's like these scientists, like, they place all the blame for what they did on, which is, I guess, again, that goes into sins of the fathers, because it's like they're creating this creature that's like their son that they blame for the failures that really were on them for, like, the way they brought him into the world in the first place.
Yeah.
But there's a really good bit where, because he sees someone graffitied on Henry's grave, Henry Frankenstein, maker of monsters, and when he decides to, like, resuscitate the creature, he, like, crosses out monsters and writes maker of men. That's a good.
That was everything. I was like, this is what I
it's
fucking
really good. And again, like, because Lugosi as Igor is really good, and it was during the scene where Igor is talking to Wolf that I was like, man, when did we stop, like, making movies that are just a bunch of classically trained theater actors? Because, like, man, you don't get shit like that anymore.
No, literally everybody would be like, oh, that's just too unrealistic, too blah blah blah. That's everything. What do you think we're here doing?
So they rebuild the lab, and I noticed, like, it's interesting how each of these movies tries to, like, kind of update their own science to be, like, where the modern understanding of science was at the time. Because he has this whole explanation of, he's like, my father thought that it was lightning that brought the monster to life, but actually he had harnessed these, like, cosmic rays that science at the time didn't understand, and that's what made the monster live. And it's just an interesting way, like, of like adding more sci-fi, more contemporary sci-fi to this already, like, wacky premise.
Which I love how, like, the more things change, the more things stay the same. Because it's about the third one in, like, modern day slashers that we start getting silly explanations for things that we didn't need an explanation for. We've already suspended disbelief.
Yeah. Yeah, well, yeah, because he's, like, looking at his skin or his cells under a microscope, and he's like, oh, he's able to, like, regenerate and rebuild himself, so that's why he's, like, so indestructible.
he also, I was gonna point that out in Ghost of Frankenstein, but since you brought it up, the monsters suddenly become, like, a superhero.
Yeah, well, actually, we'll get to that in Ghost of Frankenstein. There's a scene. But, yeah, and so the townspeople are like, literally, a new Frankenstein has been in the castle one day, and he's already rebuilding the lab. We don't like how this looks.
How many times do we gotta teach you this lesson, old man?
So they interrogate Igor, and I like how they're like, we hung you once before, and he's like, yeah, you hung me, but I didn't die, but you did hang me, so you can't hang me again for the same crime. And they're like, shit, you got us there.
They're like, and I'm like, wait a minute, I think that's an American judicial system rule. They didn't necessarily have to apply that here. the prevention of a retrial or whatever. But the heck it's called. But also, yeah, it's pretty funny. The beat is really, like, kind of comedic though, because they're really, like, threatening about it too. They're like, oh, we'll hang you again, old man, and he's like, okay. Yeah. Look at how the last
which, again,
one
it's
out.
Such a good scene for Bela Lugosi, because he's just, like, he knows they're not gonna do anything, so he's just, like, fucking with them. Because there's a part where he's like, oh, my neck makes me cough sometimes, and he, like, directly coughs on this one guy just because he can.
I just love how Bela Lugosi chooses.
Oh, absolutely. But yeah, this scene is important because he points out, he was like, you and you specifically were the guys who, like, judged me last time. So
okay, also sorry.
That was an important scene to, like, it sets up stuff later.
Yeah, I think it sets up stuff later, and it also sets up for where he ends up in Ghost of Frankenstein. Like, I feel like where he ends up, I feel like I get the thoughts he has in Ghost, he like formulates, it feels like, in this scene. And it feels like the other side of his arc is the end of Ghost. Because I could see him because at this point, yeah, he's like, everybody is stupid and I should be their strong leader.
Which, yes.
Which we'll get there later. But
we have the first experiment to like resuscitate the monster, and he harnesses the cosmic rays, and like I want to say it doesn't quite like take immediately, because the monster doesn't respond. He's like, well, shit, this didn't work. I'm gonna like go home and do something else. And we do get a scene where they set up, another important thing is that the lab being built on these Roman baths, there's this like sulfur pool in the background where they're like, it's like super hot and like you would die if you fell in or whatever. And that's definitely not going to come back.
Sulfur. Sulfur.
And I think, yeah, at this point, this is when the inspector first comes and he's like, hey, you're not building a monster, are you?
That's what we call in the bit. That's what we call a plant in the biz. But yeah, I love all the interrogating that happens with like this and Ghost of Frankenstein, because it's so silly. It's like, so you're not doing this bad thing, huh? And he's like, oh no, but he's so suspicious about it.
Literally,
it's like so obvious.
Also, I noticed she becomes a little more involved later, but this wife is probably the most passive female character we get in the series.
Which, it's so fascinating that it feels like it went the complete opposite direction, and it feels like it's to balance out Bride of Frankenstein, probably.
I can see that.
Because I feel like Bride of Frankenstein was so, like, pre-feminist that, like, they almost have to, like, okay, now we got a human character that's a woman involved. We gotta, like, chill out. That's what that kind of felt like to
there's,
me.
like, some lines where, like, in the first two movies, she was always, like, the wife character was always, like, you need to stop this, I sense bad things, and then you get, like, the female monster and, like, the Mary Shelley in the framing intro. And here she's like, the inspector's like, hey, where's your husband? And she's like, oh, he went off to the lab or something. I don't know. He's just doing lab stuff.
Yeah, she's just chilling. Yeah, it's interesting. It's very noticeable for sure too. Cause like Son and Ghost, they're both like really like heavily masculine plots too. Cause like I feel like the way men beef is so silly.
Well, especially
there's something incredibly
in movies
campy
like
about
this
it
too, especially. But
yeah, they're all like, yeah, it's really wacky.
I had another thought in there.
It feels very like Wesker and Chris in Resident Evil.
Pretty much. We also get an interesting there's this subplot that because the inspector's talking to the kid and the kid says something about a giant showed up and played with him, and so there's this subplot that the monster is like interested in and keeps visiting this kid, and we never see it until like late in the movie, and it's interesting to me that this is like a thing.
I think I've seen this film before.
It's interesting that it's happening in the background, but also that we establish this character of the monster, of him continually like, it's almost at this point it's like his self-image is that he's a kid, and so he wants to interact with kids because he's like, that's those people understand me the way the grown-ups wouldn't.
I think it's that, and I think it's also playing off of the first time he murdered a kid. We're all waiting for him to murder another kid.
Well, yeah, I think it I think having those having those
purposes.
two at once, it creates this interesting thing where you're like, on the one hand it shows that the monster is trying to like redefine who he is, but on the other hand it creates that like tension.
The monster's self-care era.
But,
self-discovery era.
But so some the giant talk makes Wolf be like, wait, he's not talking about the monster, is he? So he goes back to the lab and he sees the monster is gone. And he's like looking around and the monster, this is where we get
he's like, oh my god.
We were talking about like the movie feeling very stage. And this movie also, especially in the lab, feels very staged, because there's a part where he's looking around and the monster climbs out of the sulfur pit in the background while Wolf is like has his back turned in the foreground. And it's a very like, again, like the blocking is very like stage production.
The blocking is very like, you were supposed to not join them.
You are my brother, Frankenstein. But then we get like a good interaction between the monster and this is like the reveal of the monster, and we get him and Wolf kind of facing down, and it's like there's a he kind of like looks at him suspiciously, because it's almost like the monster recognizes like the family resemblance or something.
He just has his PTSD triggered.
Also, Lon Chaney Jr. as the monster in these two, because Boris Karloff was off doing other stuff.
I thought Boris Karloff was the monster in this one, and then Lon Chaney was Ghost.
I think Chaney was in... Okay, no, yeah, Karloff in this one, Chaney and Ghost.
Because I feel like Chaney looked so different.
Yeah.
Which is fine. We'll talk about it when we get to Ghost.
But yeah. But yeah, so Igor kind of steps in and establishes that he has kind of control of the monster, and that he's been able to like make him do stuff he has this flute, and it's almost like a snake charmer type deal, where he like plays the flute and the monster will like kind of do what he wants.
Like the Pied Piper.
And like even later we get Wolf, he's like writing in his journal, and he's like, Igor has control of the monster, I need to figure out how to get control of the monster to like... It's not like I can't remember what he says, but it's not like I need to stop Igor because he's unsavory. He's like, I need control of the monster to prove that I'm better than everyone else.
Literally. It's literally that.
Then, you talked about slashers earlier, but this is also where we kind of get that, because Igor starts having the monster one by one kill the guys that he like established as being targets in the courtroom scene.
Which, that's where the Godfather got. No, I'm just kidding. No, but what I was gonna say is oh man, I lost my train of thought to make that Godfather joke. Shit. Continue.
And yeah, there's and as this is happening, they've like
Oh, I remember what I was gonna say. It does carry on the German expressionist feel too, because it feels like a very like Caligari setup.
Oh yeah,
that's
for sure. Because I think Caligari has been in Frankenstein's DNA since like the first movie. But yeah,
This one especially though, like you were saying about the
and this is the inspector is like having dinner with the Frankensteins, because they've like as a cordial gesture they invite him over, and he has to go. He gets called about this murder and he runs off, and that kind of establishes more tension between him and Wolf Frankenstein, because they're he's like, this guy is hiding stuff and he's acting incredibly shifty. Also we get
which the Frankenstein family, they just can't handle
great
stress.
Scientists, terrible poker players.
Yeah, they cripple at the second something goes off.
Also, you know what, we were talking about like the representation of women. This is, I think, when did the Hays Code like take effect?
Oh, definitely before this.
I'm trying to I don't know if the first two fell under it or not.
I think they
Okay.
did for sure.
Because I was thinking, this movie we get, they go, uh,
34 and 68.
okay.
Or 34 to 68.
Okay, and this was 39. Okay, yeah.
This was 39. Yeah. Yeah, these were all for sure the
Okay. But they establish, they go to their bedroom, and one of the maids is like, oh, it's an old superstition, lay the beds head to head. But it's like, it's a thing people joke about in all these, like, Code era movies of, like, they're like a married couple, and they have these two beds that are, like, kind of kitty corner from each other. That
Yeah. I think that was a direct rule. It's like to a married couple. I think the way the rule is written, it's like a married couple can't be in the same bed together unless one of them has a foot on the ground.
That's now that I think about it, I wonder if this was them trying to, like, toe the line, because the beds they're in separate beds, but they have that line about them being, like, diagonally, like, head to head or whatever. Because I was like, oh my god, their beds are almost touching. What sluts.
Oh my god, they're so fucking risque for that. This film is so over the line.
But that's there's a scene where they're, like, in bed talking, and this is where the wife kind of I should know her character's name. I didn't write it down. She starts to kind of like behave more like the women in the last few movies, where she's, like, got some kind of, like, preternatural sense of that, like, something bad will happen, and that, like, she wants to go back home and doesn't like this place and all this stuff.
Which that might be a carryover. I don't know if it's this conscious or not, but that since it's so German expressionist, it feels important to note. But Nosferatu kind of has that dynamic with the woman, where, like, she has, like, this almost psychic ability.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's deliberate or not, but it's certainly interesting how women always are depicted that way.
And also during this time, we established Benson was one of the servants, and the monster killed him off screen. And that ends up, like, being an important through line. But after, so another of the councilmen gets killed, and the inspector comes to basically the inspector is like, I know you're doing something, so if I stay at this house, watch, like, with you 24/7, either you won't be able to do it or you're gonna have to slip up. But they have kind of this standoff where the inspector's like, I know you're up to something, this will be easier if you just tell me. And Wolf is like, fuck you, I'm not saying anything. But he's during the whole thing, Wolf is playing darts, and he's using this dartboard as, like, a character prop, basically. And, like, the more, like, he keeps throwing the darts, walking over, picking them out, throwing them, and, like, the longer their confrontation goes on, the more like, angry his dart throws get. And I was like, it's such a good, like, that's such a good, like, stage actor making a character choice bit.
Also, great direction.
Yeah.
Great direction as well.
Because, again, like, that's one of my favorite scenes, because you have two, like, good actors, like, playing off each other, just having this really, really good confrontation.
Yeah, I really like how the Frankenstein movies are really heady.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of pondering concepts, as opposed to, like, hardcore action.
Yeah. Which I think that's something I like about, because I keep thinking, like, how would you do a Universal style horror movie today? Because I feel like it has a lot of early DNA of a slasher, but, like, pacing wise, it's very different, and it's a lot more, like, ponderous like that.
I think right now there's a de-emphasis in language in films. Because I don't think there are as many trained storytellers in the same way as this era. And so I just think the style right now for film isn't very wordy. Everybody wants films to be very like visually heavy. And so I think like films like this aren't as popular.
That makes sense.
You know what I mean? Which I don't agree with it.
Well, that's
my observation.
Because that's the thing. This is a sidebar, but so a lot of people really like Damien Leone for making Terrifier, and he
oh my god, Terrifier's wild.
What was it? After All Hallows Eve, but before Terrifier, he made a movie called Frankenstein versus the Mummy. And I think it's a really fun, like, neat take on Frankenstein. And a lot of people didn't like it. And I think one of the reasons they didn't like it was because it tried to do this type of horror movie. Whereas, like, Terrifier played off more of the, like 80s slasher kind of vibe.
Well, also in filmmaking, there's this rule now that's, like, or it's like this, I don't know. What do I know? But there's this rule that's taught that's like show don't tell. But I think like when you're getting into some of the like concepts of like nature versus nurture, what's like legacy X, Y, and Z, like I don't think words are bad. I just think that like not enough people are like super good at writing.
Yeah, just dragged so much of Hollywood.
I feel like it's like.
I'm with you. But...
Well, I think it's like I think it's like I don't think it's like a bad thing. I think it's just like it's like we're taught.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's like been a de-emphasis in like a lot of language in film, which is super fascinating. Unless you get like a Tarantino, Tarantino's I feel like the closest to like something really like lengthy.
Yeah.
I love talking movies. I love hearing people talk. You know what I mean? But a lot of people, I think it's like also like there's a trend with like faster movies too. And I think that like two people having a conversation about the nuances of a topic isn't really necessarily something a lot of people want to watch also.
This is making me feel so validated as like a filmmaker because I really like writing lengthy dialogue. And I'm always like, man, am I telling too much and not showing enough? And like, you've just made me feel so much better about my writing style.
Yeah, it's like a hard balance for sure, and I think it's like I think it's why it's really important to just be authentic to yourself as a writer, as opposed to like you know what I mean, just doing something. Because I know so many writers who like they feel like they can't write the long dialogue, and it's just kind of sad because they're really good at it. You know what I mean? Maybe the trend will switch back to. I mean, I'm trying to bring old Hollywood back.
We'll get there. But back in this movie, we get the inspector's gonna leave, and he goes and talks to the kid, and the kid shows him. He's like, the giant came again, and he gave me this watch, and it's Benson, the servant who died's watch. Which also, every time they mention Benson. Have you ever seen The Regular Show? Or
oh no, I have not.
There's a character named Benson, and also specifically there's a TikTok audio where he's like, "How about now, Benson?" And so every time they said it, that's where my brain went. But the inspector's like, "Okay, here's a guy who has disappeared, and this kid has his watch. I'm going back in there." And then we get a really good shot of because basically at this point the wife has started asking questions where she's like, I've been trusting you, but like you are acting shifty. What's going on? And he's like,
but like what the heck is going on over
what
there?
I like is as they're arguing and as she's like, I don't want to think that you're like doing this horrible stuff your father did, and he's like, what do you know, and all this stuff. There's a portrait.
Don't you dare say that
There's
about
the
my
portrait
dad.
of Henry Frankenstein, like, in between them in the background. And that's, like, such a good visual, because it's like he's literally coming between them.
I think, like, that's the, like, balance of, like, the show versus... You know what I mean? Because you still get the, like, conversation that is wonderfully woven and you could read into, but you also get the really strong visual.
Yeah.
This film's a good blend of both. Yeah, that's shot slays. The cinematography in this one, honestly,
really
my
good
favorite.
cinematography.
It looks so good. Yeah, it's so stylized and interesting.
And so then we have so Wolf
Which, like, sorry, really quick side note, I feel like the cinematography in this one is very reflective of Young Frankenstein as well.
Yeah, I think so.
They have the same, like, color correcting. Like, I know it's, like, all black and white, but this one is so crispy. In the same way that Young Frankenstein is.
Yeah. Well, also, I think it's also...
very high contrast.
It's also, I think it shows how just, like, over time they were refining their craft. Because, like a horror film of the early 30s going to a horror film of the, like, mid-30s. Like, just that film had, like, exploded so much as an industry that, like, there were so many, like, different techniques all of a sudden.
Yeah, that's such a great point, because it's not that the cinematography is bad in the first two. I think it's actually super good there too. But, like, yeah, like you said, there's just a refined
or I guess its identity as a film is stronger, because, like, in the first movies you could tell they were like, we'll take these things we know from making theater and apply them to the camera, whereas now they're like, it's established what the camera is, and so they're treating it as its own thing.
Yeah. No, that's deep.
But so Wolf he goes back to check in on Igor, and he's like, what the hell are you doing, you know? And he finds out that Igor and the monster have been, like, hiding in this cave underneath the laboratory. And there's, like, secret passages and stuff, and he's like, what are you doing? And Igor's like, oh, don't worry about those. Those go nowhere. And we get more confrontations with Wolf and the inspector. This is where the dartboard thing happened. I was getting that confused. And so basically, he I'm trying to remember when this happens, but he realizes that.
Well, I know in the passages come in, doesn't he go find the guy's body?
Yeah, the inspector, he casts Detect Hidden Doors, the D&D spell, and he finds...
and he rolls so well.
He finds Benson's body. That was also it, because I wrote, there's a TV serial fight with Igor, because Wolf and Igor basically come to blows, and the choreography for the fight is the most like 1950s Flash Gordon kind of, like, Star Trek the original series fight choreography.
Oh yeah, and let me tell you, the Frankensteins, I said it earlier about the other thing, not very agile either.
They're men of brains, not of brawn.
Oh, fully. Which is kind of funny, but it's interesting.
But yeah, and then we get so Wolf, I think he's implied to have, like, killed Igor, which doesn't stick. But the monster finds Igor's body and is, like, really broken up about it, which again is interesting because, like, it's another hint at the monster having this character depth where he actually cared about this guy he thought was his friend, when a lot of the movie is painting him as this monstrous, horrible thing. So we're still getting that depth.
And it's so interesting because at the end of the day, the only one that really suffers in the movie is the monster. In, like, all of these movies. It's very interesting.
So the inspector at this time, he goes back to confront Wolf, and he's like, what, how do you explain this watch? I found it in your kid's room. And they basically piece together as it's happening that the monster is gonna go like take this kid now, and like make like, I don't know, either hurt, like, I think it's implied he's gonna like kill the kid as revenge, which is also interesting because like that implies some like complex thought patterns on the monster's end.
Mm-hmm.
But I was Wolf.
How old would the monster be at this point?
Well, if he was born in the first movie, we assume like Wolf is probably in his 30s. He wasn't born when the monster was. So he's probably like mid 30s at least.
Got it.
We don't know how conscious he was for all of those 30 some years, but
okay, Slay.
But Wolf does this, so the monster is like, I think the inspector like grabs the kid or something, but then the monster is standing in front of the pool and Wolf does this like epic like swing in drop kick and knocks him into the pool. Which again, it's like very Star Trek fight choreography. I love it.
And like I feel like anytime Frankenstein gets a hit in, it's like an accident. It's like a luck. It's a sheer dumb luck.
And then they get and I love basically this pretty much it immediately cuts to they're like on the train, like him and his family now. They're like, "Yep, we're leaving this country. We're not coming back. This is just all a mistake. Fuck this. We're out of here."
And the villagers are like, "Thank God."
Yeah.
Good riddance.
That is Son of Frankenstein. Yeah, it does that thing where like there's a lot of really strong build up and then like all of a sudden the climax like peaks really quickly and then ends off really quickly.
Which like in a way I kind of wish that would come back for movies too. I think the only person allowed to make 3-hour movies is Martin Scorsese. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, like I like a little bit of like, you know, falling action, but you don't have to. 3 hours is too much unless you really know what you're doing.
Yeah, that's tea.
But that
or unless it calls for it, like an epic movie.
Yeah. So yeah, we end Son of Frankenstein, which tails directly into our next movie, Ghost of Frankenstein, which we'll look at next time.
The Ghost.
Yeah, there we go. We still don't have a. I'm not making Frankenstein noises, so we can't end it with like the wolf noise.
How does I'm just doing it like, you know, I just went for the creeper from Scooby-Doo.
Maybe that's
which is kind of Frankenstein.
I mean, yeah. End it with like a lightning clap, like edit that in.
Exactly.
Yeah, we will.
Yeah, I did like Son of Frankenstein.
Yeah.
How many Tesla coils would you give it?
As many as are necessary.
I mean, out of 1 to 10, 10 being the best Frankenstein.
I mean, there's still a few we haven't seen yet, but I would give this at least an 8 or a 9.
You were like House of Dracula. I think that one's gonna be up there.
Listen, I'm not
Costello, the best Frankenstein.
I'm not passing judgment until I've watched everything.
You're a true academic completionist.
And how about on your end?
You know, I did really like this one. I would give this one a 7 out of 10.
Solid, like that pizza guy on TikTok.
Yeah, solid 7 out of 10.
But yeah, so we will. Yeah, so that is Son of Frankenstein, and we will see you next time for Ghost of Frankenstein.
Heck yeah!
Bye, everyone. Hey everyone, Peavy here. If you enjoyed today's episode of Movies After Midnight, consider giving us the old like and subscribe so that you can stay up to date when we drop new episodes. If you didn't enjoy today's episode of Movies After Midnight, consider following me on one of the many social media platforms out there and leaving criticisms or strongly worded hate speech. Either way, thanks for tuning in. Hopefully I'll see you next time.